The Timekeeper by Mitch Albom. The core teachings of The Timekeeper by Mitch Albom, especially through the character of the Doe, which is Father of the Time, can be summarized as time is a gift, not a burden. The character Doe learns that by inventing the measurement of time, he gave humans the ability to obsess over it. Counting minutes, chasing deadlines, fearing death, his journey teaches that the true fulfillment comes not from trying to control time, but from living meaningfully in the present. This is not a full audiobook of this book, but this is going to be a summary in which you can get a true feeling of this book. So, Chapter 1: The Beginning of Time. Long before clocks and calendars, before humans marked the passing of days with numbers, there was only silence. The earth turned without hurry, the seasons shifted without reason, and the stars remained undisturbed, following their unchanging paths through the sky. In a quite forgotten corner of the world, a man named Dor existed, someone who would unintentionally change the course of human existence. Dor lived in a village where time wasn't something to measure. His people don't know of hours or minutes. The concept of time didn't exist. People worked by the sun, eating when they are hungry, sleeping when they are tired, never counting the moments between. But Dor was different. From a young age, his mind was restless. While others were content with the rhythms of nature, Dor felt the need to understand why things happened the way they did. He often lay awake at night staring at the stars, wondering what force held them in place, what made the seasons shift and the days pass in their steady, unrelenting cycle. Driven by a need to know, Dor began his experiments. He would count the shadows cast by the moon, tracing their path on the ground like a hunter tracking his prey. He watched the sun rise and fall, meticulously marking its progress in the sky. His observations turned into symbols of stones, crude marks that represented the movements of time. The villagers didn't understand his obsession. They saw him as a man lost in his own thoughts, distracted from the work on the land, but Dor was not concerned with their opinions. His mind has become consumed with the question of time. He needed to quantify it, to control it, to understand its very essence. One evening, while sitting alone in his stillness of his home, Dor had an epiphany. He could not just measure time in seasons or the rise and fall of the sun. He could divide it, create intervals, moments, pieces of a great whole. He could create time. With a sharp tone, Dor carved the first measurement of time into a rock, a division between one moment and the next. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but to Dor, it was a monumental. It was a turning point, the beginning of a new reality. Time had become something tangible, something that could be quantified. As Dor looked at the rock in his hand, he knew that what he had done would change everything. He did not realize that he had set the course of human history. He had created the idea of hours, minutes, and seconds, and in doing so, he had opened the door to obsession, to anxiety, to the very thing he would come to regret most: time as a constant, relentless force. The first moment Dor realized the magnitude of what he had done wasn't one of triumph, but of terror. As soon as the idea of time was born, it began to grow uncontrolled and wild. People began counting the moments, obsessing over what come next, never content with the present. The world around Dor changed. At first, it seemed harmless. Dor's own curiosity grew as the idea of measuring the time took hold of his thoughts. But soon the people around him, his friends, his family, and neighbors started to change. They became anxious, no longer satisfied with the simple pleasures of their day-to-day lives. They began to count every hour, every second. They started planning, calculating, and fearing the future. The moments between were no longer precious, only the next. It wasn't long before his fellow villagers looked to him for guidance, seeking a way to manage their time, an endless cycle of planning, working, and waiting. They no longer lived for the joy of living, but for the fear of losing time, of wasting it. The world, it seemed, was no longer content. In the midst of this chaos, Dor found himself standing alone in the center of the reality he had unwittingly created. Time had become a cage. People spent their days rushing, not appreciating the world around them. They started counting their lives in seconds. Time wasn't just something to be managed, it was now the ruler of their every thought. It was then that Doe felt the weight of his mistake. Time was no longer a gift, it had become a curse. His creation had shifted from a tool of understanding to a tyrant that controlled every human heart. The obsession with time had turned people into slaves of its passing. He realized too late that time was never meant to be measured, only lived. The higher powers, the forces that governed the universe, took notice of Doe's action. They watched as time, once a fluid, untamed force, became an instrument of suffering. In a moment of judgment, they decided to punish Doe for his transgression. He was cast into a prison, a timeless existence. It wasn't a place of torment or physical pain, but one of deep psychological anguish. Doe was suspended in an endless moment, unable to move forward or backward. He became the keeper of time, the one who had invented it, forced to witness the suffering of those who had become slaves to it. The punishment was not just for Doe, but for all of humanity. Time was now an unyielding, invisible chain. Doe's endless life, without the possibility of death or escape, became a reflection of the very thing he had created. A world governed by time, where people lived in fear of losing it. Centuries passed in Doe's prison, a timeless void where he experienced neither of the progression of days nor the relief of leaves. His mind, once sharp and full of curiosity, became frayed as it turned in endless cycles. He watched the world below and the suffering of humankind helpless. He saw people in distant lands obsessed with the clock, driven by the fear of time slipping away. He could do nothing but observe. One day, the higher powers sent him two visitors, two souls trapped in their own struggles with time. Their lives had become twisted by the very thing Doe had created, the constant, oppressive ticking of the clock. These were the ones Doe would help, though he had no idea how to do so. He had become the keeper of time, but now he would be its teacher. The first visitor was Sarah Lemon, a young girl of 15 full of promise and dreams, but weighed down by the heartbreak of unrequited love. Sarah had been in love with a boy named Patrick, someone who did not return her affections. Her love for him consumed her. Every minute spent thinking of him, every second counting the days she would never get back. Time, for Sarah, had become an enemy. She counted the moments she had wasted on him, each tick of the clock a reminder of a failure. Sarah's heart was broken, and she had allowed the pain of time slipping by to drown her. She had stopped living because of every passing second reminded her of a loss. She wanted to go back, to read the past, to turn back the clock and undo the mistakes she had made. But time for Sarah was unforgiving. The second visitor was Victor Delamont, a wealthy, aging businessman. Victor had lived a life of excess, wealth, and power. He had everything he could ever want except one thing: more time. Now, facing the end of his life, Victor was obsessed with finding a way to cheat death. His search for immortality had driven him to extremes. He had invested vast sums of money in cryogenics, hoping to freeze his body and return when science had advanced far enough to bring him life to back. Victor feared death above all else. He had spent his life chasing power, control, and pleasure, but now, as his time ran out, he realized that he had spent it all foolishly. His obsession with avoiding death had made him miss the life that had already passed. He was a prisoner to his own fear of time running out. Doe was these two souls. Knowing their pain was a reflection of the suffering he had witnessed for centuries. He had created time, and now time had become the tormentor. But Doe had learned something during his eternal punishment, a lesson he would pass on to these two visitors. Time could not be controlled, nor could it be avoided. It was not something to fear or run from. It was meant to be lived, experienced in the present, not wasted in longing for the past or in fear of the future. Doe's prison was cold and silent, but now it had become a place of learning. He had learned to accept time's passage. Though he could not never escape it, he had lived long enough to understand the futility of trying to control it. and now he was about to teach two souls the very lessons he had taken centuries to grasp. With Sarah, he began by showing her the weight of her obsession. Her love for Patrick had consumed her, but what she had failed to see that she had spent so much time mourning her unrequited love that she had lost sight of herself. Time in her mind was something to be regained, something to turn back, but time could never be turned back. Doe told her the clock moves forward. He said, but you are not bound by it. You are free to live in the now. The present is the only moment you can control. Sarah was resistant at first. Her pain was so deep, her loss was so consuming that she could not imagine letting go of the past, but Doe showed her the way. She could not reverse her mistakes, but she could start anew. Her life was not about waiting for the time to heal her wounds. It was about living in the present, appreciating what she had in the now, and moving forward. It is not the moments you wish you could change, Doe said gently, but the moments you will choose to create. Sarah's eyes filled with understanding. Slowly she began to release her grip on the past, to let go of the moments she could never retrieve. She started to focus on herself, on the world around her, and the potential of the future. It wasn't easy, but it was the first step toward healing. Next, Doe turned to Victor, whose fear of death had driven him to madness. The wealthy businessman had spent his entire life chasing time, avoiding death, punishing away the inevitable. He had placed his faith in technology, in science, and in his ability to outsmart the very nature of life. But now, as the end of his time approached, he found himself powerless. You cannot buy more time, Victor, Doe told him. Time is not a commodity. It is a gift, a finite resource that cannot be hoarded or manipulated. The more you try to control it, the more it controls you. Victor's eyes narrowed. His wealth and influence had never failed him before, but now they were useless. He had built an empire, but in the end he could not control his own mortality. Doe continued, you have spent your life accumulating riches, but you have missed the true wealth. Living fully in the time you have, fear of death will never give you more time. Only living in the present can. Victor remained silent, but there was a shift within him. He began to realize that he had wasted precious time that could have been spent enjoying the moments that truly mattered. The chase for immortality had stolen from him the life he could ever lived. As the two souls absorbed the teachings of Doe, they began to understand that time was not a force to be feared, but one to be embraced. It was a gift, not a curse, and the more they tried to fight it, the more they would suffer. Time, Doe had learned, was not merely a force to measure. It was a teacher, a relentless guide through life cycles. Yet even in the deep solitude of his internal punishment, Doe had come to see that the secret was not to resist time but to live in harmony with it. He had seen it in the struggles of others, recognized in his own sufferings. Time had not been his enemy. His own failure to accept it had been. As Doe was Sarah and Victor, he could feel the change happening with them. They had learned to look at time differently, not as something to fight but as something to cherish. Time was not merely a series of ticking sounds, it was life itself, in all its beauty and imperfection. The moment of reckoning came when Doe realized that these two souls had now learned what he could never unlearn. Time must be lived, not feared. They had come to understand that it was in embracing their present moments, not escaping the past or seizing the future, that true peace could be found. Doe's heart, once burdened by guilt, began to feel lighter. Perhaps in some way he had redeemed himself. Now one final lesson awaited. The higher powers who had cast Doe into his eternal punishment were watching, waiting for the right moment. It was then Doe realized time had a way of giving back what it took. The knowledge he had shared, the lessons he had imparted, had allowed him to transcend his prison. He no longer needed to live in endless observation, for he had lived these souls find peace. The balance had been restored. When the highest power spoke, it was not in anger but in acknowledgement of his transformation. You have redeemed yourself, they say. You no longer need to remain the keeper of time. You have understood its true purpose. Time is not your enemy, it is a part of the great cycle. You have loved through it and come out wiser. Now you are free. With those words, Doe felt the invisible chains around him loosen. Time no longer held him in its grasp. He was free, not from time itself, but from the fear and guilt that had bound him for so long. He was no longer a prisoner of his creation. As doors stepped forward into a new beginning, Sarah and Victor, now at peace with themselves, disappeared into their own lives. Their paths forever changed. They carried with them the knowledge that time was not something to fear, but something to embrace. And for though it was not the end of time, but the beginning of living with it. Now that's it for the summary of this audiobook. If you want the full audiobook of this book, just let me know in the comment section. And if you want to get the ebook of this book, precious book, just let me know in the comment section.